Welcome to You Brew Kombucha. Today we're going to talk all about my favorite flavor, passion fruit. I love using passion fruit as a kombucha flavoring. I find that it's fantastic on its own and as a great combo with other different fruits as well. I don't think there's a single fruit flavoring that I've tried that wasn't made better with the addition of passion fruit. And so I have been testing and buying all sorts of different passion fruit products that I can get my hands on to try to recreate the flavor profile that fresh passion fruit gives me. Because even though you can find fresh passion fruit from time to time in grocery stores and specialty food stores, the reality is that fresh passion fruit is really difficult to find. And not only that, but it's pretty pricey. So I got these at a local grocery store, and each fruit was actually $2, which is way more than I'm willing to spend for a piece of fruit, even one that I love as much as passion fruit. So something that's a lot more cost effective. My favorite way to use passion fruit as a flavoring in kombucha is using these frozen fruit pulp packets that I buy from my local Mexican grocery store. This is the brand that I happen to have on hand right now. There's another brand called La Nuestra that's actually my favorite. That's the one that I generally prefer because it tends to produce a more consistent carbonation level and more consistent flavorings, but Goya is also fine. I was also recently able to find frozen passion fruit with the seeds from another store here in Los Angeles, a Thai grocery store. And I'm really excited about this because I actually really love the texture and the crunch that the passion fruit seeds bring. The frozen pulp is fantastic just for that clean flavor. And if you're not interested in getting the seeds, definitely try to find this if you can. But I am really excited to be flavoring with the seeds because they're fantastic. I've also tried a few other types of passion fruit juice that I've bought from the store. And what I've found about the ones that are kind of shelf stable, there's one that's sold in a box. It's a pasteurized juice blend that's just labeled passion fruit juice. What I find about those is that generally the passion fruit flavor doesn't come through as much. Weirdly enough, a lot of passion fruit juices that I've found on the supermarket shelf, passion fruit is not even the first ingredient listed in the juice blend. And for whatever reason, these brands can get away with just calling it passion fruit juice without disclosing that it's actually a juice blend until you take a look at the ingredient labels. Passion fruit is a really tart fruit. Even when it's fresh, even when it's ripe, the seeds and the little juice that's inside the passion fruit itself is really, really tart. And so most people aren't familiar with what the inside of a passion fruit looks like, but it looks like this. So it looks like this kind of alien, gnarly looking thing. And when you taste it, it tastes really tart and sour. This one's actually pretty sweet. That's really a lot sweeter than most passion fruit, most fresh passion fruit that I'm able to purchase. But what I love about it is the unique crunch of the seeds that's really unlike any other crunch that I'm familiar with. It's a little similar to the crunch of a chia seed, but it's a lot larger. So imagine the crunchiness of a chia seed, but on a slightly bigger scale. That's what fresh passion fruit tastes like, or passion fruit seeds taste like. So more often than not, I'm not working with fresh, I'm working with this frozen pulp. What I like to do is just leave it out at room temperature and let it defrost until it's at a liquid state. If you're in a hurry, you don't have to just wait for it to defrost at room temperature. You can open up the packet and put it in a microwave safe container and just microwave it until it is totally liquid. I'm just gonna add all of that passion fruit juice right at the bottom of the pitcher. And I do want to have some passion fruit seeds in this. So I'm gonna just scrape out the passion fruit seeds from this fresh passion fruit. And then I'm just gonna open up this package and add a few more. And again, if you're not interested in adding the seeds, you can just omit this step. So at this point, just give it a quick stir. And that frozen packet of passion fruit that I use isn't sweetened with anything. So it's going to be very tart, like I mentioned. And it could use a little bit of sugar. So I'm just going to add, I usually just kind of eyeball it, but go ahead and just add some sugar in there. And if you're worried about sugar content in kombucha, also remember that if you're undergoing second fermentation, if you are going to add these flavorings to a batch of kombucha that's undergone first fermentation like I have here, once you put it in the bottle and you leave it at room temperature to continue fermenting, so that secondary fermentation, that sugar is going to be digested by the yeast and bacteria in the kombucha. It uses sugar as a food source. So it's basically using that sugar to continue to ferment, and as a byproduct of that fermentation, that's what produces carbonation. So if you want your kombucha to be fizzy, sugar goes a long way in helping to make kombucha more carbonated. So it isn't just there for flavor, it actually serves a pretty utilitarian purpose as well. So just go ahead and stir this up. Get that sugar dissolved as much as you can. And usually when I am using the microwave to basically melt that frozen chunk of passion fruit, I will go ahead and just add sugar right before I put it in the microwave so that as it melts, that sugar can start to get incorporated into the passion fruit at that stage. We've got our sweetened passion fruit. Just give it another taste. There we go. So not too sweet. Still has a good amount of tartness in there. I think that's enough sugar. And again, so much of this is really so dependent on taste. I think what I added there was maybe about a half cup of sugar. You can just add little by little until it gets to the sweetness level that you like. Basically what you want to aim for is a mix that's a little bit on the sweeter side so that by the time it's gone through that secondary fermentation process, it'll kind of level out that sweetness, it'll temper it down and get to a better level of sweet and sour. So at this point, we now have our flavoring. What I generally find is that one packet of that frozen passion fruit pulp, which is about 14 ounces, is generally a good amount of passion fruit for flavoring about 1 gallon of kombucha. So it tends to work out pretty perfectly. So here is a batch of kombucha that has been fermenting for about a week or so. I'm gonna go ahead and taste it to make sure that it's at the right sweetness level, sweet and sour level, to start bottling it. Nice. Good amount of tartness, still a bit sweet, but I think that'll blend perfectly with the passion fruit. So again, just as a quick reminder, you can't really use SCOBY growth or SCOBY size as an indicator of when your kombucha is done fermenting. First fermentation is really highly dependent on your taste preferences. So you can bottle it at the 1 week mark, the 2 week mark, the 3 week mark. If you like your kombucha really tart, I recommend letting it ferment for at least a couple of weeks or so. But it really is dependent on so many different factors in your environment, like temperature and the strength of your culture and how much starter tea you added to your kombucha to begin with. So definitely check out the other videos on my channel if you're curious about how to tell when your kombucha is done and ready to bottle, or if you have other questions about the brewing process. But for now, we're just gonna focus on kind of flavoring this gallon batch of kombucha and bottling it. So I'm going to grab a vessel to keep this SCOBY. Clean hands. And you can actually see that this thin kind of mucousy alien thing is the very thin SCOBY that was trying to form across the top of the liquid here. But because it's rather cold right now, it's kind of wintertime, early springtime where I live. SCOBYs don't really grow super thick for me in the wintertime when the temperatures are colder. So I'm not overly concerned about that. Really, what I'm just going for is making sure that it has acidified, that there isn't any mold growth, and that it tastes good before I'm ready to bottle it. So I'm gonna use a strainer to basically strain this kombucha liquid. And the reason why I strain is just to make sure that there aren't any tea particles or yeast particles that grow. I'm gonna stop right there just in case and just do kind of a taste test. I also want to reserve about 2 cups of this liquid so that I can use it in a future batch of kombucha. So let me grab a measuring cup. I'm just gonna keep this reserved unflavored liquid to use as starter tea for a future batch of kombucha. And if you have a SCOBY hotel, you can basically take this SCOBY, take this starter tea and put it directly into your SCOBY hotel. And that SCOBY hotel is really great to use as a receptacle for unflavored, clean, fermented kombucha. But I'm just gonna keep it to the side for now since my SCOBY hotels are elsewhere at the moment. So I've added about a little less than 2 quarts of fermented kombucha here into the passion fruit mix. And I'm just gonna give this a taste to see if the flavoring is at a good level, or if the passion fruit is too potent, then I'm gonna go ahead and add the rest of this tea. Nice. I think I am gonna go ahead and add the rest of this tea. There we go. See how that strainer has caught some little strands of yeast. It's totally normal to find strands of yeast in your brew. That's actually a good sign that fermentation is happening. Those are all good yeasts. So go ahead and just stir the mix. Give it another taste with a clean spoon. Perfect. Yeah, that 1 packet to 1 gallon of kombucha always seems to work perfectly for me. So at this point, we can, just make sure that it's still perfectly stirred, and we can go ahead and put it into our bottles that I have ready here. So I have a mix of a couple of different types of bottles. This is a stout bottle, and over here I have a ring neck bottle. Both are approximately 12 ounces, I think. Yeah, 12 ounce bottles. And I'm just gonna go ahead and fill all of these bottles up. And I'm actually finding that a lot of the passion fruit seeds are getting caught down in the bottom. So it's always a good practice to just stir periodically in between bottling to make sure that your bottles are as even as you can make them, if you care about that sort of thing. There we go. So now all I have to do is just cap these bottles. So here are my bottle caps. So these are just basic F217 caps that I talk about in a couple of my other videos about bottles and bottle caps. And these are actually my favorite caps for brewing kombucha with, because not only do they keep a very tight seal on the bottles, especially if you use these rubber grippers to make sure they're sealed extra tight. But what I also love about them, as opposed to flip top bottles, the top of these caps is actually flat for the time being, but as they build up and get more carbonated, you'll actually see this cap curve upward. And so for me, whenever I'm trying to tell when my kombucha is done fermenting at room temperature, and when I'm trying to gauge when it's time to put them into the fridge and when they're ready to drink, all I have to do is basically look at the top of the bottle and see if it's curved upward. Once it's gotten to a point where it's curved upward, that is a good indicator that it's at the perfect level of carbonation and they're all ready to refrigerate. So I'm a really big fan of these caps. And if you want to learn more about them, definitely check out the video that I linked down in the description box below, because I go into a lot more details about these bottles and these caps there. But there you have it. I hope this was really helpful. An entire video dedicated to my very favorite flavor of kombucha, passion fruit. If you follow me on Instagram, you'll probably see that the majority of my posts have some sort of passion fruit kombucha in them. If you have other questions or are curious about other topics related to kombucha brewing, definitely check out the other videos on my channel. And as always, you can find more details at my website, youbrewkombucha.com. Happy brewing!